In 1998, a neurologist sat with a patient in Reno, Nevada. The fellow that he was sitting with was locked in. The neurologist's name was Bill Torch, and he sat with a man who, you know what locked-in syndrome is, people? Okay, you know ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. So locked-in means you've lost the ability to move anything other than your eyes. And there's a variety of neurological conditions that can lead to this state. So this man, Bill Torch, at that point, teamed up with a fellow, went out and created technology to track the man's eyes blinking. So he created blink detection technology, went to Radio Shack, bought some parts, and allowed the man to blink, to communicate by blinking with Morse code, and that was in the late 90s. Over the next roughly 15 years, he went through 7 generations of wearable eye tracking technology. So he built a variety of devices, got funding from the Department of, from the NIH, DOT, DOD, and I happened to meet him in 2012. And so I want to actually use that as an anchor in 2012. I'm going to back up and explain the journey that got me there, and then see what type of dots I can connect based upon the years I've had here speaking, people that I've met here, and what I hear is a common passion that we all share for impact and improving the world, and see what might come out of this. Okay. So quickly, a few slides quickly. My background was in telecommunications early on. I was at MIT. I met Warren when I had created this product to address the problem of geographic illiteracy in the world. Created a sphere put on a base with a computer, a processor, and used the stylus to allow people to touch the surface, and had this idea to make a talking globe. The theme that I hear as well here is we're up against challenges on how do we overcome impossible, can't, no, and lots of adversity. And people say, it sounds really good, that's a great idea, but where's the money? Where's the funding? How do we achieve this? So I've heard this now, I've founded now six companies I founded or co-founded, and I've heard it almost every time. And usually it's you can't do it, it's impossible. So I want to share some comments on that and see if the degree to which I can help anyone here move forwards. So the idea of a talking globe seemed crazy, people don't want it, why? So question to ask yourself, I mentioned the rocking chair retrospective last night. Question, my favorite acronym, you heard it yesterday, I heard it again, is PTS. PTS. Anyone remember what it is? Okay, what problem to solve? What problem are we solving? We know that Einstein said if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd take 55 minutes to figure out the problem and 5 minutes to solve it. So it's usually defining the problem, and most times, and I see this in business, when we talk as well, what is the problem we're focusing on? Oftentimes you think it's something else. The globe, was it teaching geography? That wasn't really the problem we were solving. The problem we were solving was the fear of embarrassment and anxiety among adults that felt like they didn't know something. That was the problem. And if you gave them a tool to allow them to explore, they felt good about it, so did children. So once we realized that, we were able to promote it in that way, and it worked. So it worked. We sold millions of these products. Next idea I had was taking that technology, flattening it out, putting paper on top of it, and saying, can we teach kids to read? What problem? And the same thing I had. Kids don't want it. It'll never sell. I went to the president of Toys R Us. I went to lots of people, worked at this for a while. The answer was, we don't want it. Kids want screens. They don't want paper. And this is in '98. Even then they said, kids don't want screens. It turned out they did. And you know, the results from this, we had a lot of versions of leap pads. We sold over $1 billion worth of leap pads in about 5 years, and they were in 77% of households with kids from 4 to 7 years of age within 5 years. How? Why? What problem are we solving? What problem are we solving? You've seen leap pad, yeah?
Early learning literacy.
Okay, literacy. That's one way to phrase it. What problem are we solving for whom?
I think you're solving parent anxiety about having kids who are literate technically and in language arts.
Precisely. We're solving the problem for the parent. We're solving the problem of concern about them arriving at school and not being able to read. And by the way, in education, having sold products at Leapfrog, we grew from, I sold a company in 98, 99, we brought the product to market. The company's total sales are about 16 million. We moved from there to 650 million in sales in 5 years, so it doubled virtually every year. And it was because we understood how to focus on the parent's need and the child's need. And the child's need in this case was a feeling of, we know this, designer's mastery and control. It gave them a sense of the ability of control with a strong emotional support. So that worked as well. The next thing I had was looked at that and was I spotted this technology company in Sweden that had put dots on a piece of paper, put a camera that took up a pen, and let you be able to move the pen around a page and create a digital copy of ink. So I thought it was interesting. It took me 3 years to convince this company to allow me to license that technology to Leapfrog. 3 years, I flew back and forth to Sweden, all over the country, trying to convince them. Eventually, they let me do it, but only after they had another VC, it turned out, 3 VCs in Silicon Valley, Greylock, Bain Capital, and Kleiner Perkins, had funded a little company that was competing, was going to be the Leapfrog killer. And these guys had a means to be able, they were going to make a pen that would allow a kid to touch paper and be able to interact. And that was going to displace the LeapPad. I found out, and I was struggling to convince Leapfrog to do this, found out, went through a very rough few months and convinced our board to move ahead and to allow me to fund this, even though these guys were, the VCs were flying to Sweden on private jets, convincing them to give them the technology. It took me that much to move this instead. So we eventually were able to get it. But the idea of putting a computer in a pen was, again, it was considered ludicrous. So the problem I was initially solving for productivity was, and I said yesterday, if you're taking notes, do you write or do you listen? Okay, with this tool, it's solved because it's capturing audio for you and synchronizing links so you can go back and touch your notes. So eventually, after being told it couldn't be done, moved ahead, sold millions of pens, the company was acquired. But then, now that brings me to this link. So the journey here for me was one of figuring out needs for people, emotion, emotion, emotion. Every one of these, you need to understand how someone feels and why they feel the way they do, and understand and really then design the technology around achieving a means to make them feel better about what it is they're doing. So when I then met Bill Torch, had this idea, said, wow, instead of, he was working, and we started working with people with disabilities, found out the market was going to be very difficult. Instead, I made a phone call to Google, found someone there that was interested, and they had just announced Google Glass, and said, okay, what if we put this technology there? And I struck a nerve. So the idea that I had was, I mentioned yesterday, to transform intent into action through your eyes. So what does that mean? It means being able to do anything you could do with like your finger on a smartphone, but with your eyes looking at a display, but faster, and without doing two things that all the papers said that you have to do if you're going to create interaction with your eyes. They said, all the literature, I read this and it was very depressing because there's got to be a way to do this. And they all said, well, if you want to let someone control something, allow them to look at an object and dwell on it and wait, or use blinking. And there were a couple other exotic approaches. And those are terrible interfaces. I mean, imagine we saw the results. You're blinking with Google Glass, you're staring at something and waiting, it's slow, it doesn't work. It's anything but natural. So I said, there's got to be a way. So I started reading papers. And before I get there. So I started reading papers, had an idea, was convinced that this might work. So at that point, I had a neighbor in my home in Lafayette, California. My neighbor had been badgering me for years to visit a local service club in the town called Rotary. Anyone tied to Rotary in any way? Okay, are you any Rotarians?
Rotarian.
You're Rotarian, okay. So it turned out I eventually went and I presented one company and a year later another one, and then when I presented this idea for glasses, it had some success, presented to a group, and it had a really interesting interest developed. So quick note on Rotary, this organization. It's a huge service organization, 1.2 million people around the world. They have little clubs in towns. There's one in New Hope, I checked it out, one in Lambervtille, and Flemington. And so Rotary clubs, and they're usually 20 to 50 people, occasionally a little larger. They get together once a week, once every couple weeks, and they raise money to give it back to the local community, raise money to give it back to internationally to support originally eradication of polio, which is almost gone, from 300,000 cases about 30 years ago to now about 25 so far this year. It's coming down. And also to support projects around the world in education, in literacy, in water, sanitation, nutrition, healthcare, and it's a really reputable, high-quality organization.
They helped start Media Tech.
Did they?
Yeah,
excellent.
We got a grant from them early on.
So here, this is the most text I have on each slide. Things I just covered. 1 million people. They've immunized 2.5 billion people. The Gates Foundation is donated $3 billion to support their causes as well. So there is money and support here. I mention this because my guess is that some people here working on projects could probably find funding. As we heard, Warren did already, and the clubs looked for projects to fund. That's what they do. And they raise money to do it. I'll tell you how this connected in a way that I never saw coming, because so I presented, here it is, February 8th, 2013. I had this idea of doing something with your eyes with glasses. And I had met Dr. Torch, was thinking about it, presented this to our club, and these 5 people, after I presented, their hands went up and had one question. It was all the same question: can we invest? So they said, I said, sure. And at that point, that moved me forward. I decided to go ahead and start the company. So I did, and eye interaction. So let's go down this path for a second. Why eye interaction? At the time, was looking at all forms of head-mounted display devices, AR and VR, and was looking at modes of controlling them. And they were fundamentally incomplete, using your finger along the side of your head or pointing at things. It just didn't make sense to me. So said, gee, what if we were to come up with a means to let you navigate, activate, pan, scroll, zoom, play games, interact just with your eyes? And so, as I said, started doing some deep reading, started to look at the brain and the eye and connection, and started to read about your eyes and discovered some amazing things. And from this, we looked at how light flows through your eye to your retinal area, foveal area, how the information goes to your occipital region in your brain, how you process it, how your eyes move and don't move, how they're distracted, and how you think when you're looking. And did a deep dive on this and found some amazing things and created this concept we called an IUI. So a different from interactive user, eye-based user interface. It was a play on it, but to control with your eyes. So a couple of questions for you. First of all, who knows what a saccade is? Okay. Okay, Carrie and great. Well, let's try something, if I could. You to look at my right finger with your eye. Look at my right finger. Just look at it. Okay. Now, without moving your head, look at my left finger. Okay. Now, put your eyes back on my right finger. When I tell you to, keep your eyes here. When I tell you to, I'd like you to move your eyes slowly, smoothly, and continuously from my right finger to my left finger over a 3-second period. One smooth, 3-second slow sweep from right finger to left finger. Are you ready? Go. Okay, I'm watching you, Mark. Now do it smoothly. Okay, Krista, smoothly. You can't. It turns out your brain won't let you do it. It doesn't work that way. Now, watch my finger. Now, without moving your head, just keep your eyes on my finger and watch. Now your eyes are moving smoothly. Okay. This thing is called a saccade, and it's the way our eyes move. When we're watching the world, and right now you're watching me or you're looking around at my hand back, your eyes move in a saccade, which is a ballistic motion. Your eyes start moving, they speed up, they slow down, they stop. The time is predictable. It's roughly it's about twice the degrees in amplitude. This for you is people about maybe 10 degrees, 20 milliseconds plus another 20. It's about 40 milliseconds for your eyes to move from here to here. Further, when your eyes are moving between those 2 points, you're blind. The flow of visual information to your occipital cortex is largely shut off. So your eyes move from here to here, you don't see anything. And you can try this. If you look at your eyes in a mirror, if you ever try to look at your right eye and your left eye and look back at it and watch your eyes, you can't see them moving. Because when they're moving, you can't see. So it's a fascinating phenomenon. This is called a pursuit. It's called a smooth pursuit, and your eyes will track something that moves. So we took what was initially a really big challenge, this idea of something that was a problem. I kept bumping into it and saying, damn, these saccades. And finally just flipped it around, which is a great strategy, and embraced it. Said, okay, let's use them. But what happened was amazing, and I'll show you some examples. The second thing was, when you're looking forward, if you just for a second, hold your arm up, put your thumb up, cover one of your eyes, put your thumb over my face, wherever you're standing, look towards me, okay? And at this point, look at the amount of the field of view that your thumb is blocking, okay? That's 2 degrees of your field of view. It's a good rule of thumb. It's 2 degrees, okay? If you were to hold a circle out like this, it's about 10 degrees. It turns out that that area, that 2 degrees, is your foveal area. That's where you see high resolution. When you're making an image of the world, and you're looking around, your eyes are going from point to point to point, blind between all these points. You're mapping high resolution little pieces together. You think you see everything with high resolution. You don't. You see 2 degrees high, moderate resolution, 10 degrees, this size, and then outside that, you don't even see color. You think you're seeing something in color over there. You're not. It's a memory of what you think the color is because you've learned it. Okay, for instance, take a look at this image right here. And I want you for a moment to look at this rock right here. Okay, look at the rock right there. Keep your eyes on that rock. Okay, this is really what you're seeing, your brain is seeing, something like that. And it's worse yet, I didn't take the color out, but you're not seeing color out there. In fact, go ahead, let's go back here. Stare at that rock for a second, and without keeping your eyes off of it. It depends on where you are. There's a house up here above my finger. Keep your eyes looking at that rock. Can you tell what color this house is above my finger?
No.
You can't. You think you can. Now look at it. Okay, it's a blur right there. There's some yellow. And if I were to put this previous slide back, you can't tell. So why is this relevant? Well, because we dug deeper. And here's what happened. I'm going to show a couple of short videos. Previously, I would have brought a headset. You'll see me on a video, and this is online too. I can show it. The headset now is at Google. I sold my company to Google. Google has the hardware, and I can't use it any longer. But I'll show you what I was able to show at the time. Okay, is it working? You see my eyes? I'm going to begin moving. I'll just put this in my pocket. Okay. So right now, I'm moving my eyes around. Okay, and I'm going to move counterclockwise. Okay, hands in my pocket, I'll keep my hands out. There's no clickers, there's no voice, so I'm just going to move counterclockwise consistently, one by one. The airplane, photo gallery, health records, eye gaze, a grid, settings, gaze casting, a checklist, weather, text, and retail. Okay, so you saw my eyes, you could see my eyes moving. Okay, let's go to another one. So you could see that I was getting visual feedback. That box was specifically sized so that I could see it. If you notice, when I moved my eyes from point to point, the object I moved to didn't change, but a box appeared around it. That has an amazing effect on relieving anxiety, because when your eyes go through this blindness and they land at something else, if it's different when they emerge from blindness, it feels bad. On the other hand, if there's just a little bit of a highlighted box around it, it doesn't. Nobody knew this. We looked at all the eye interface designs, and when you move your eye, it would change. And it just puts you off a little bit. So that's one piece. Now let's look at how you activate it. So first of all, can you see my eyes? You brought that up. Okay, is it working? You see my eyes? I'm going to begin moving. I'll just put this in my pocket. So what I can do is launch the airplane and find out what time there's a flight from, say, Reno to Hawaii. On the other hand, let me go home again. And if you watch my eyes, you'll see them moving around. Let me check the weather there. And it's a nice 81 degrees in Maui. It's 55 low, an hour ago. Let me check this out. I'm going to go home again. In the upper right corner, there's a photo album. And there, I've got some pictures. So you can see in the upper left corner, this is a favorite picture of mine. There's my wife on the right side. This is our team after we closed our Series A. And my wife and I took our team to Hawaii. We had some partying. And while we were over there, I'll zoom into the next picture. You can see we were on a hike in a bamboo forest. And also, at our office, everywhere in the office, we have everyone's picture with their eyes with some notes beneath it. If I want to, I can change pages. And here's an interesting one. There's some people on our team. By the way, I'm doing all this, as you can see, with my eyes. No winking, no waiting. Just eye contact. So in this case, there's some people. I'm going to pull down a menu, and I'm going to turn on recognition. So now I can see, oh, there's Steve. There's Ben, and there's Zoe. And anytime I want to, as you've seen, I can just return home. Okay, so.
Wow.
I'll skip the next ones. I can show you sending an email message, sending a text message, buying something I looked at, having biosensing to recognize my iris, so they could tell that it was me and continue on. So all that is doable. And the cool part is I could put you in this headset and you would be doing the same thing in about 60 seconds.
So
That's
Jim, just to be clear,
Yeah.
this invention of yours could make it so anything you look at, you could buy?
Just curious, how do you think this worked? Okay, I'll explain it briefly, because at the time I couldn't show, there was a couple other things on that screen that were sitting there that are not visible in the video because we were filing IP on it. But I'll tell you what was there. First of all, remember the leap pad had this green go circle on the side that ran up and down the page? And it was there because you could then touch the go circle and it would tell the system what page you were on and map the audio to the page. So on this screen, over on the right side was a little green spot. But what's interesting was we designed this so your eyes would move around, and as you look at an icon, an application, you get the feedback that it was, quote, selected, but not activated. When you would move your eyes from there over into what's called your parafoveal view, outside roughly about 10 degrees away, your eyes would go through blindness, and you'd sense a green spot. You knew it was there, but you didn't quite see it. You couldn't tell it was quite green. But you'd move your eyes towards it, emerge about 40 milliseconds later, land on that spot, and what would appear on that spot would be a thumbnail of the thing you were just looking at. So if I want weather, I would just look over there, weather would be there, which felt like it's reading your mind, first of all, but it would give you context, and when you would know that you had activated weather, then we would move your eyes because we expand that icon out into the whole screen and pull your eyes back to the center. It was sensual. It really felt good. I mean, when you tried it, it felt great. And we also had a spot up on the top, upper right corner, we called a reveal, and you would look at that, it would reveal on the screen other spots in very low intensity. So it basically opened up menus, so your eyes would move from one point to another point. And people said, gee, will this happen, and will I accidentally launch things? No. I mean, your eyes don't accidentally go over to a personal, someone's private parts on the body. They just don't look around that way. You know what it is you're looking at. You choose. So this worked extremely well. Another example was we put a globe there, and this was in VR demo we had. Put a full globe of the world, and I would say to someone, take me to France. And the globe would spin around and France would appear. And they'd just be looking. How did that happen? Well, what happened is they knew France was kind of towards the east, so their eyes would saccade to the east, at which point the globe would start to spin back around. Their eyes would follow the globe as it's spinning around until they realized, oh, they wanted to be further. They'd look over again, it would spin a little more. They'd look and see France and would move over and come to the center. So it would be a mix of saccades and pursuits. They didn't know what they were doing, but it just happened. And we photo album scrolling, scanning, some amazing things that just worked. And so we cracked the code. It really worked, coupled with the eye tracking underlying it. So this went on for several years. We got lots of attention. We figured out how to do these things. These are old. And Google bought the company in October just about 2 years ago. So we had success. Then I got a call back from my Rotary investors, and they said, hey, let's get together. What if we donate some money back to the cause? So we got together and saying, gee, let's do something. My criteria were sustainable and scalable. Because we talked about donating to a local hospital, to a local kids event. And I said, let's do something bigger that we could grow. So I tossed out the idea, being in VR with eye tracking, said, what if we were to create the world's first VR-a-thon? He said, what the VR-a-thon? So what would a VR-a-thon be? We know what a bike-a-thon, walk-a-thon, marathon. They tend to be the lowest CPDR, lowest cost per dollar raised fundraisers you can do. It takes a lot of work, but they're little money, and they raise lots. So I said, what if we created some content? And what if we were to put this content on smartphones? We use Google Cardboard, which cost about $3, and I was at Google. And what if we put this in the hands now of a few 100,000 Rotarians, let them go out and walk up to someone and say, hey, I'm doing a VR-a-thon. The person says, what's that? And the Rotarian says, well, I'm raising money and I'd like you to sponsor me. Here, watch this. And they hand them their cardboard, their phone with cardboard and a VR. Put a couple of earbuds in their ears, so it's free and it's available. And what happens then is the person watches this, and if you design the VR right, we know it's immersive and emotional. So suddenly the person pulls the headset down and goes, wow, that's incredible. That's what you do at Rotary? Yeah, will you sponsor me? What does that mean? Well, instead of paying me for every mile I walk or ride, just pay me X dollars every time I show this to someone else. That's VR. So let's swap riding from doing, now I'm part of the cause and I'm showing it, I'm getting people's reaction. So I took this idea, so I had that idea that evening, took it to they liked it. I got on the phone with Rotary, met the people in Evanston, their headquarters, world headquarters. Before long, I had the president at Google meeting within literally about 6 weeks. He was meeting with us, and 2 weeks later, he asked me to, I'm going to skip VR, I know what this is all about. Basically, they said, look, this is powerful, and I did some research and found lots of nonprofits have raised a lot of money using VR. You probably know this. United Nations with Clouds Over Sidra increased their annual raising by roughly $1 billion using VR. Tom's of Maine, Sierra Club, Charity Water, they're all using this in different ways. So VR as a fundraising tool can be pretty profound. So I brought that to Rotary and said, look, we can get a low-cost viewer, it's inexpensive, it It works with an iPhone. We'll put people in this story. We're going to develop empathy and understanding for the causes that Rotary stands for. And then went through this list. And it just clicked for the organization. Hey, it helps their brand, it improves visibility, it increases membership, it down-ages the membership, helps them raise money, creates partnerships with companies like Google, and drives what I said, polio. And my phrase was that violence is not a sustainable means of conflict resolution. I think that'll resonate with people here listening to the knowing folks. And so it said, let's see what we can do with this idea, and if we can create some VR. So, went to this presentation. It looked like a UN. This was the board of trustees and the trustees and board of directors at Rotary. There's in the back, those booths are all language translators. This is people from all over the world. General average age about 70 with this board. They'd never seen anything like VR. So we arranged to have cardboards sent down ahead of time. That morning we got their phones. We loaded an app on their phones, scurried around, put this all together, and I stepped up to speak about this idea, and they're just silence. Austere group, and they're just deadpan, and said, okay, we're going to let you experience this. So we hoisted up the VR cardboards. They each looked at it. They put some earbuds in we had. Decorum melted. It fell apart, and these people were high-fiving. There were tears, there were howls, there were screams. The content that I used was Chris Milk, his evolution of verse. If you want a piece of VR content that's powerful, it's got the classic train coming at you across the lake, which explodes into a series of flowers, which go to the sky and turn into banners, which fall down, pull you into a vortex. You go through the vortex and merge with this texture. You pull back and realize you're in a womb and there's a baby reaching towards you. It's a powerful piece of VR in about 2 minutes. It's incredible. So I use that.
What's it called?
Evolution of Verse, V-E-R-S-E. It's on Chris Milk, his website. The application on your phone is Within. W-I-T-H-I-N, and it's brilliant. So I used that, they liked it, and it clicked. So I got support. They rallied behind it. I then went out and in about 6 weeks spoke to a variety of Rotary clubs in the Bay Area, NRI, and raised $500,000 to do a piece of VR content. People donations. This is donations, and so we produced this. The idea was to produce a live action piece, so I worked with a friend of mine in New York, Charlie Melcher, Melcher Media. And who here has ever produced a VR piece of live action content? Anyone? Okay, just for fun, we produced this called One Small Act. It was set in 1992, wrote the script. Polio had been eradicated in 90% of the world at that time, but there was conflict and violence in Bosnia. This is what we created that threatened an outbreak of polio. So we had violence and we had polio, and put you in the scene. So in this scene, you see a little girl, she comes up to her house, she meets her mom, the house gets blown up, they vanish, and they're suddenly refugees. They move between point to point, and there are acts of kindness that are delivered to the little girl who has her teddy bear with her. The teddy bear, we did VR in 360 and also did a VR camera through the teddy bear's eyes. So when you're in the headset, you move between looking around and stepping into the bear cam, so you see the world through the bear's eyes, and you see the fur over your head, and you become the bear, then you move back out again. So we did this, and the piece, it was very cool. But when you want to see what it takes, it was a big production effort. That's a 360 VR camera. If you've not seen one, it's just got a lot of, this early version was handmade, it was expensive, GoPro. This is a high-end stereo microphone for 360 sound. That was the bear's head into which we put the camera. You can see mounting the camera in the bear's head, and that was the rig that we used for audio. Anyone guess what that is? We had to blow up the house. So this is a debris gun, and it's a big gas-filled chamber that you let all the gas come out, and there's charcoal in it. And it basically blows in through the window, so you can see in this slide, we had it positioned outside a window where the scene was taking place. And when the time came and we hit the cue, these debris cameras blew it in through the window, and it looked like there was an explosion. So it was a lot of fun to do this. We set up a scene where we showed polio drops being delivered. We went by houses that were melting down, and we were able to see live, real time, the video being done, so we could see what it looked like in 360. There was a full set, a full team. It's about 70 people altogether, And as we were filming, we were outside in the country, outside Bucharest in Romania, and we had this caravan of trucks, and the people in costumes looked like they were refugees, and people were stopping on the street thinking that they were invading from Syria. They thought they were live refugees, and they called the police because they thought something was going on. So weird things happen. And it wrapped up with a lot of fun at the end. So from there, we took this, and my goal was to see if we could break a world record. So this is from October to the following June. And we produced this piece in a matter of, once we finally got it all together, about a month and a half. We showed it then at a conference in Atlanta. Rotary has an annual conference where 35,000 people come from virtually every country in the world. And we showed this there, and we had the world's largest single co-located viewing of VR in history. And that took place June 13th, 2017, a little over a year ago. And this is what it looked like. Again, one idea that sparks from something that is not obvious, that turns into something. And there's so many ideas in this room that need to be fueled, that need to be fertilized, that need to run. And they happen with a few things. It's a passion, and we'll talk about. So it's now in 8 languages and available. As an organization, I said Rotary is virtually, other than the white countries, there are clubs. And these are the clubs in the US engaged with literacy. So clubs they're sponsoring and they're supporting, and they get grants from Rotary International as well in Chicago. So it is a means to be able to get support for your ideas. So more dots. So that was last year. This year, had the great opportunity to be invited to their conference in Toronto. And you can see it was a stadium. It was about 20,000 people. So I was fortunate enough to speak right after Laura Bush on the topic of education and literacy. And it's online. It came out well, but I did a lot of research that I was speaking about here about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, referring to orality and literacy, how basic writing has evolved human consciousness and how it's changed the way we think, as well as tying this back to a book. So books on your reading list. One that must be there for everyone is called Factfulness. Great. So Factfulness is a book by Hans Rosling, and it was recommended by Bill Gates. He's offered to give this book to every matriculating college graduate for free this year. It's a book that looks at the state of the world and shows us that the world is actually a lot better off than we think it is, and it's data-driven, and it's very PTS, problem-solve focused. So a phenomenal book. It also took me into understanding more about the United Nations SDGs, Strategic Development Goals. So who knows about UN SDGs? Okay, so everyone here that is on a mission, check out the UN SDGs, because under the SDGs, there's 17 of them. You can see the small icon down here. There's 17 SDGs, and they step into homelessness, into water, poverty, education, literacy, gender support. It basically, if it's a major problem in the world, it's probably covered. Strategic Development Goals. And so check it out, because beneath those are much more clear definitions about what's important in the areas. And again, your cause probably fits there. So that led me, again, now I spoke there and ended up meeting more people that led to now I'm working to drive the use of VR content to address some significant issues. I was in Atlanta last weekend, and there's a club in Alpharetta that's well-heeled and is interested in looking at these areas, the use of VR to address homelessness, transitional homelessness, human trafficking, opioid dependence, youth suicide, and in general, empathy and understanding. So I'm working to see if we can get funding and drive some VR creation content, which then we could scale globally and see how far we could go. So that's another project. A couple other dots are, have a book coming out this month called How to Raise a Founder with Heart. And Warren, thank you Warren again, there's a quote. Warren wrote as an endorsement, How to Raise a Founder with Heart reads more like a story-filled conversation with Jim rather than a list of parenting directives. And it's full of helpful seed ideas that might grow into some much-needed solutions. And I got a great endorsement from Tony Robbins, who's a friend, and it should be good. And it starts with what's the PTS, what's the problem to solve, which with raising kids is something you can teach them. It looks at the founders' 3 go-to points based upon Simon Sinek's model of why, how, and what. If you know Simon Sinek, MIT TED Talk. And then it's basically how to think, how to feel, how to lead, and how to found. Those are the chapters after the first two. Lots of stories, science, and suggestions for parents on things to do in raising kids that may help them. My son is 26. He's founded a second company. My daughter's founding a nonprofit organization to help autistic spectrum kids with a running program she's scaling nationally at universities. And my wife has founded a project that's already been printed on the space station with STEM students. And now she's working on an issue around long-duration space flight and psychosocial issues for well-being of astronauts. So a number of projects going, so there's a lot of founding that happens. The other thing, stepping away from Google and connecting dots, here's my book list to offer you, and I'll make the slides available too. All tremendous books on AI, consciousness, what AI means to us in the future, positive and negative. Superminds, Human Plus Machine, Max Tegmark, Life 3.0, Thomas Friedman, who wrote The World is Flat. Thank You for Being Late. Pinker's book, Enlightenment Now, is superb. And Behave is on the biology and the brain science of why we do what we do. This is here, and here's the date it was published, the ratings for the books, the reviews, number of pages, the author, and some notes for me that stuck out. So, okay. Sorry, I had a video, but we'll pass on it. Rival Theory is a company that I've been working with for several years. We're making AI personas of people, and specifically of thought leaders in the world. Oblong Industries, if you remember the Tom Cruise Minority Report movie, the fellow that created that was an MIT Media Lab fellow, and he was recruited by Steven Spielberg to Hollywood, went there for a year, and worked on developing that scene, that interaction model, and then said, I should make a company to do this. So he created Oblong Industries, and they have a collaborative work environment that is uncanny, that lets you move objects around, multi-stream, multi-user, multi-device. You can grab objects and move them in and out, and it really facilitates collaboration. So I'm on that board. Foresight AI, we're doing high-res data for mobile robots, collecting it with drones. I'll do a little more.
We don't get to see you that often.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, what I can show now, let me go off record for a second.
Yeah.
Okay. So, there we go. There's a shot from Burning Man as well. So how many of you have been to Burning Man? Okay, got two. So I went to Burning Man this year for the first time. Spent the better part of the week there. 10 miles in Black Rock Desert in Nevada. It's a social phenomenon. If you haven't done it and you're not put off by the sight of lack of clothing occasionally, it's not that extensive. And certainly there's partying, but it's discreet as well. So it's not this rave that people might suggest it is. But you have to be willing to be in a desert where you may have a dust storm that will make it impossible to do anything and just hunker down for a little while. But where do you see a set of doors in the desert that just are random? And see something that looks like a velodrome that has people hanging and hitting each other with styrofoam wearing kind of Mad Max costumes. I had a video, but or a stack of cars that people are climbing on, or costumes and images of, and this is a stainless steel sculpture about 30 feet high. And there's what's called the temple and the man. So Burning Man is set up so that next to the last day, the man burns, and you have roughly 50,000 people surrounding this blaze, and there's a lot of partying going on. The next night, the temple, which is a place where people go to deposit memories of people important to them, and you see that on the left. For the whole week, they put notes, books, memorabilia in this place, and it's silent. It's a shrine to people that have been important in their lives. That second night, this whole thing is designed to be burned, and that burns, and this is what you see. And at that night, when that's burning, you have now a similar number of people around this area in complete silence. Not a word. And the feeling is palpable because the loss, you've been in there. You can't go into this temple without crying. If you look around and see what people have written about the loss of their children 3 weeks ago and their parents and other people, it's very, very touching. So let's go from the top picture is a view from above. It looks not real pretty. That's a view of Burning Man, which are tents and RVs. And that was in the left side, you can see, it was in Nevada. And for me, about 4 weeks later, I went to a different place over on the right side. And if you know that continent, you recognize that's Western Africa. And there's a picture of what I saw there and went there on a service trip. I went to Benin, to Cotonou, which is a city right along the coast. It's about 500,000 people. Average income there for those people is roughly less than $4 a day. Went there and we delivered vaccines or immunization in the form of drops for polio for kids, and also looked at projects. And this was the scene as we were getting ready to go out into the area to deliver these. There's the drops, and those are the homes of people that we went to. I mean, it's about as low as it gets. There's dirt, some have electricity. It's struggle, it's difficult, but what we found was the same thing. You find happy kids. And the kids have life, and they're just enjoying life as kids. And we then went next door to a town called Ouidah, Uidah, which is one of the 3 slave trading towns, where you still have a Portuguese fort, and they routed somewhere near between 500,000 and 1 million people through this that were shipped out as slaves. So going from, it's real interesting looking back at this year between these experiences of technology, of Burning Man, this phenomenon, with people going for different reasons with art, and then to Benin, and I'm heading this weekend to Guatemala as well on a different searching project for education, bringing LiveScribe Pen to see if we can ignite the use of that technology, possibly for a new way to teach and for kids to learn. So the problem to solve, I mentioned before, violence is not a sustainable means of conflict resolution. And the things this has led me to is thinking about that, coupled with the increasing disconnectedness and isolation that we have, and the polarization in our society that's detrimental to our personal, our social, and our global health, which I think we're all sensitive to. And how does that then tie back to Dust or Magic? So all these little dots that are connected in ways that I couldn't have seen coming, which takes me to my wife working on her dissertation for basically to address a countermeasure for NASA to figure out how to connect astronauts with their support group. Because NASA doesn't know how to do this. There are already robots on the space station. There's a picture of one, that's Simon, that floats around, it's self-propelled, it's on the space station. It's an AI character that moves around. And the papers on this are really interesting to see how do you address social isolation. The condition is called ICE, isolated, confined, extreme. And it's what discoverers, travelers had hundreds of years ago. It's prisoners, it's people in any isolated, confined, extreme area. So some great papers on this. As I look at it, then thought about this in terms of isolation. And as we know, isolation in the US is a continuing growing problem. Jesse spoke about it. We don't know what will happen, what social media does to this. But we also know that we've got a serious problem for seniors, and particularly when a senior loses a spouse. And so said, gee, what could we create? So we said, well, not just seniors, we know it's true for teens as well. So we have an opportunity here. And so what I'm looking at is at this point, to be determined if I can make it fly, if there's a business there, but the idea of an AI social agent whose sole purpose is to achieve the feeling of connectedness between an isolate and their support group. And how does one do that? So we got taxonomy designs, models for this, or assessing market opportunity, clear, interesting mix of design and technology, in this case connecting most likely young children with seniors, and doing this in a way that nobody's approached, no one's thought of. I've scoured this and no one's doing anything like it, so see if we can make that work. And so the last thought is this. This is really reaching. And I have not read this before publicly. So, there we go. So here's the idea. It's interesting. Warren and I chatted last night and chatted with Scott as well. You know, some of us, there's mixed age here, but some are reaching the points in our lives where we're looking at giving back. We're looking at limited time, our own RCRs, just like I said yesterday, the Rocking Chair retrospective, what's important to us, and where do we put our time and what we have available and what resources and abilities we have. How do we drive this? And you heard me, I'll repeat one more time, violence is not a sustainable means of resolving conflict. And that concerns me as we look at technologies, as this world goes forward, because technologies are more accessible, more subversive, more dangerous, and I'm concerned about the future of our world. So thought about chatting with Jesse about this last night. Wondered if we might be able to create some form of experience, tapping together everything that people here have spoken about and achieve a shift in behavior and mentality, and tying together the book Behave, which looks at human biology and how we shift people's ideas, and looking at all the parts of the brain that play into this, and the chemicals as well as the psychology. So tying all this together and said, gee, could we create some form of experience, multimedia experience that immerses people, not just when they're in it, like a book or a movie or even VR, but steps into their life. And this has been done in a couple instances, but something could be much larger. So I wrote a kind of an introduction prologue directed at people that might be provoked to think that maybe we could do something interesting with this idea. So it doesn't define the result, but it just is intended to provoke some thinking, so that once somebody steps into the experience and they take part in it, they tell their friends, you gotta try this, because this is shifting the way I see things, but it's pretty cool. And there has to be story, emotion, all the things that work. So here's a kind of a high density description. Not description, it's kind of a teaser. So wherever you are right now, stop and look around. What do you see? Are there objects? Some living, perhaps people? Do you have a sense of place where you are? A sense of time when you are? A sense of purpose? Why you are doing what you're doing? Are you aware right now of your classical senses that enable you to see, hear, feel, smell, and taste, that are helping create these other senses of place, time, and purpose? Can you feel all of this occurring through the processing that's taking place in your mind? You may be aware that there are atoms forming molecules, cells, and other biological constructs that are making all of this happen in your brain. These other senses, called time, place, and purpose, are simply mental constructs, or models that are generated by the atoms that form the synapses in your brain. We could codify this chain of chemical and electrical activity by these brain atoms, if we chose, as bits or binary digits of ones and zeros, to represent and possibly replay this sequence, either with atoms or perhaps in some numerical model. And as you've been reading or listening to this description or stimulus, a new set of bits represented by new atomic activity might have been logged. Today in our era, we're mastering the means to be able to transform atoms to bits and bits to atoms. We can send a file of bits to a 3D printer to produce an object, perhaps even in another place or time. We can send a collection of bits to print a manuscript of a book. We can send bits to a factory to produce a manufacturing tool that pops out millions of copies of plastic bottles, or to a machine that sews millions of shirts, or to robots that produce millions of other robots. We can move bits to define a biological process called CRISPR, to literally modify your DNA to allow your body to fight cancer, or even eventually to modify your brain cells to evoke new thinking that might be viewed by others to be a higher level of consciousness as we evolve ourselves and our thinking. Think of the arbitrariness of this dance between atoms and bits. Our sense of place, time, and purpose, whether evolved through some series of probabilistic mutations, some cosmic force, or some intelligent entity driving some grand master simulation of which we are bits and atoms, are what we use to drive our actions and behaviors from love and hate, anger and kindness, fear and calm, to drive and manipulate more bits and atoms. If you begin to look at the world through this lens of bits and atoms, and question our behaviors, our decisions, and our cultures, something quite fascinating develops, and you will begin to take control over your thoughts, perceptions, and life in a way that will advance and accelerate your personal evolution. You'll find the reins to direct the behavior of yourself and others through your mind, or their minds have been rebuilt or restructured at some atomic level you were hitherto not aware of. This journey will challenge your beliefs. It will feel natural at times, then erupt as an awakening one morning as you see the world differently. This experiential evolution will employ many of your senses and will involve a mixture of reading, listening, and occasionally immersing yourself in something called virtual reality. The transformation that will result at an individual level and at a collective human and perhaps even a species level has been designed with a purpose that you will discover on your own personal journey. For this experience, you need a book, a smartphone with App Store access, Wi-Fi internet connectivity, the cardboard VR that came with this book, or an advanced VR headset, and most importantly, you'll need an open mindset. The potential is for a personal transformation that will, with your willingness and engagement, produce pleasure, stimulation, insights, and evolution unlike anything you've yet experienced with your bits and atoms in this thing we call life. Buckle in. So that's it. So here we are. Great to, again, Warren, be here and have the chance to wrap this up, move everyone along. I think having reflected on what you've done in pulling this team together to continue to think about how we help ultimately children, who are our future, improve themselves, improve the world. There's so much passion and commitment. We need to find ways to do it. So my hope is that some of the ideas, both the challenges, the adversity, which we all feel, you realize you can overcome this. Takes persistence. I'd be glad to talk more about some specifics, but let me start with what's your PTS? Define it. Make sure it's measurable and quantifiable, because most likely it may not be. So if you can do that, first of all, I could go down a list of things. A bunch of them are covered in the book about how to think that I did a TEDx talk a couple months ago on, called Extreme Thinking for Extreme Problems. So covered that there out of the context of the book. I think we're all here in this together. Let's do what we can to make a difference and bring the right impact to the world. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
So Jim, thank you. And this is a learner. This is what learning looks like.